Big man thing, yeah? It's not looking good, bruv. It's not looking good.
Welcome to Silly Whales, it's the Mental Health Podcast, and we talk about things that might be a little bit on the sensitive side. This is your warning. This is your time. If you want to escape potentially triggering things, this is your time to disembark, to disengage. But if you're here for the long haul, you're here for the journey, then by all means, welcome, because this show is for everyone, but it might not be for you. I love saying that. It's such a great, that just hit you. They just hit for no reason.
Patting himself on the back.
I have to. Nobody else will. Okay? That is it. That is the quickest I've done the intro bit. How are you, Joe?
I'm honestly stuck on the fact that you said disembark, and I was thinking, if we were a ship, what would we be called? And then I thought about a ship, and then the fact that we're called Silly Whales, and then I started thinking about a ship that would hunt whales, so I kind of stopped at that point.
Yeah, what's that story? Is it Jason and the Argonauts? No.
I was thinking of the Weller Man when you started that, but no, I don't know what Jason the Argonauts is a completely different thing, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about Moby Dick.
That's it.
Yeah, I don't remember what the name of the ship is called, but
I think, who knows? I might be talking about something completely different.
The white whale that he's hunting.
Sounds about right. Yeah, let's just say that's it.
Sure.
Anyway, thank you for listening to last week's episode. It was good. Thank you. Appreciate the additional listens, and hopefully this will keep our viewership growing and growing. We have segments now because we're in season 2. I don't know how long I keep saying we're in season 2 for, until I forget to say we're in season 2.
Yeah.
But one of those segments is this. Welcome to Mental Health This Week. This is a segment of the show where we discuss things, articles, and all of the things in the realm of mental health and all that stuff. If you want any of our sources or any of the literature associated with what we're talking about, that will be in the description below for you. This week on Mental Health This Week, we're discussing the loneliness epidemic to start off with, and this comes from an article from the Financial Times, which is paywalled, but don't worry, there are multiple ways to circumvent that paywall, discussing the loneliness epidemic facing people in their early 20s, teens, and mid to late 20s, which is where me and Joe find ourselves now. To conclude the article in a sense, as myself and Joe discussed, it's lacking things like data, but there's various other sources of data within the article. But the loneliness epidemic seems to stem from a variety of different factors, because we just don't hang out with each other in a social aspect anymore. For some reason, the article clings on to the rates of adolescent drinking falling.
Yeah.
Which, again, I remember the whole binge drinking crisis 10 years ago, which was front page of the newspapers about how young people only went out and were drinking alcohol all the time. And now that is being given as a reason for why we're no longer social. Because the reality, I'll say this again, the reason why people are lonelier is because being social costs money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is probably something that's largely forgotten, I think, in these discussions, really.
Yeah, and the issue isn't really why are these people being lonely, it's why are we so broke and poor? So if we fix the capitalist society that we live in, here's me and my propaganda for communism, then maybe we'll be more social. But things cost money. If you think about the things you want to do in the community, if you want to learn a martial art, if you want to learn how to draw, learn how to play a musical instrument, go to a live event, these things cost money, and they cost more. Case in point, football games. I have friends who are in their early 40s who remember paying £10 for a football game. And now they're paying some close to £100 for some games. The average price being £55 to £65. It's crazy. Being social costs money. I don't know whether you have anything you want to add to this, Joe.
On the side of money, I think it's interesting because obviously this shows like a sort of stark contrast, I think, between sort of how someone can experientially feel what you're describing, because someone who's earning, 35 grand outside of London is probably in a position where they're not going to have to ever think about money that way. Like they just don't have to think about going to a class that they really want to go to. Whereas for me, at the very least, and I know for you as well, but like specifically for me, I can think of how choosing to have like memberships beyond a certain point really does make a difference. And being able to like kind of have outside of your work something to go to is like a big deal. And before we move on from this point, just talking about the sort of online versions of subscriptions, or memberships, if we're thinking about things like, Netflix or other sorts, or even Spotify, I think that they tend to pale in comparison price wise. Like I'm not saying that that they're not like an expense, but so much of the, I will say, propaganda around like, oh, can people save money is like getting people to remove these things that like cost only like £120 a year, or maybe a bit more than that. Let's say like even £180 a year. So like a £15 per month thing. And it's like, that's really not that much money in the long term. Like, don't get me wrong, it's an expense, but like that's not making the difference between whether or not someone is, able to kind of save up properly. I don't necessarily like agree with any statement that says that there's nothing wrong with maybe like analyzing some of it, because I do think that, as we'll kind of continue with this, just having a membership that puts you in a position where you're on your own or staying at home all the time, or kind of like there isn't really, whether it's like Netflix or something on the internet, like there is less of a kind of social reason to like, or less of a kind of boredom, I guess, reason to just leave your house. But again, like when you're comparing it to like, okay, so every single day you have access to this, there's loads of shit. I mean, you literally cannot watch all of it without like while having a job. It's kind of a weird sort of comparison, or like, to make, I think, by people when they talk about this subject.
Yeah, because there's a lot shifting on a little bit. There seems to be a lot of, I think you've experienced this and I've experienced this, when it comes to things like loneliness, in-person socializing will always fall, because we don't communicate in person a lot, rarely ever, because you now live in another part of the country. Mm-hmm. And outside of that, we all have jobs and we all have things that we have to like are committed to. We have people who depend on us, or we have to just depend on ourselves. Like, it's hard to be social. But back when we were in our teens, like there was a period of time where I spent 3 out of the 7 days of the week at your house.
Yeah.
Because like we depended on people, no one really depended on us. Mm-hmm. And it's hard now, because I think there's a rise in young people being carers now. There's a rise in young people having to go to work a lot earlier in their lives. And there's a rise in, there's a drop in the amount of money that people are earning. So you have people working 2 or 3 jobs. And by the time you end up coming up to Friday, you've worked your 2 jobs and you've worked stupid hours for little to no pay. There is no time to be social. In my case, I work throughout the week, and then I also work Saturday and Sunday, as well as doing that same football coaching job on certain evenings as well. So if the lads I play football with say, hey, come to the pub, and they're all in the pub with their pictures because they only work 9 to 5s, and they're like, hey, look at us, we're getting drunk and shit, I can't really indulge in that because I have to be up at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, I have the same experience with Kent a lot of the time because of me having to work every weekend.
Yeah. But a lot of the friends I have are older than me, and they're in their late 30s, early 40s. So there's a degree of like, we've got hours to an extent. And they'll always work a 9 to 5. Their hours will never change. And with the advent of working from home as well, there's a little bit more leeway and more free time. However, the younger you are, the less ability you have to do things like working from home. There requires a lot more. You're under a lot more control, really. You know,
Mhm.
same with people. Like if you look at the graduate jobs at the moment in the job market, a lot of it is very little pay. And how are you supposed to survive with very little pay? You can't afford to go out and do the things that make you quote unquote social. So when it comes to the loneliness epidemic, we look to things like social media, and there's a correlation between how much time we spend on social media and the decline in our mental health. Well, social media is free, and the reason why it's free is because we are effectively the product. You know, we're being sold to advertisers. So there's nothing crazy about social media other than the implication that everything we do is being tracked by websites in order to sell us advertisements to manipulate us to buying things. So
Yeah.
like it's
And like political stuff and things like that, like, or even think about YouTube and the way that it recommends things based on, and it kind of leaves you down like weird rabbit holes and so on. Like the way that the internet's algorithm, the different algorithms work to like send you things, I think is the consistent worry of that.
And like we've both lived through the era where, you know, kids were chastised for being raucous and being too carefree. And oh, look, kids are like teenage pregnancies are skyrocketing. We lived through that, actually.
100%.
We lived through that. And now, and like, you know, there used to be this whole like shaming of a kid. Like this girl was 16 and she had a child, and the press would like slag her off. The sun would plaster her face on like page 17 and be like, how could you? And it's crazy to think that doesn't really get spoken about a lot, probably because one, sex education's increased, thankfully, but two, there's no means of being social anymore. So these things don't really exist, and everything's digital, everything's a certain whole thing. And these are good things. These are good things. These are all really good things. And the sad reality is, though, is we are being sensible, and it feels like there's still a punishment due to the fact that the rate of mental distress is increasing. So
I think that's like I think there's cultural double standards around this, which is unfortunately making the whole conversation very difficult.
yeah. I think it comes down to a lot of opinions of the lines of, because we've heard this as well. Oh, kids nowadays, they don't want to do anything. But we also got told when we were legitimately children, Joe, that if we go outside, we're going to get kidnapped or whatever. So, like,
yeah,
what do you want us to go?
I'm thinking now, like, I mean, we both grew up in London, so we have like a very particular view of this as well. But my experience was you don't, you know, especially kind of on reflection, I should say as well, was the amount to which, like, you know, your kid coming home and playing on Xbox or something like that was so much better than the idea of them potentially hanging out with some, you know, with some roadman or something like that, like some people who you don't want your kid to get involved with, right? Like that was such a consistent that was something I that my like mum found out from other parents later in life after me and mum had obviously like had our issues with me growing up and me like having the issues I had, but then having like this kind of perspective of, oh, actually it's nice to know that my kid was safe, you know, like every night, like I knew where he was and that this is consistent. And me and my dad have like gone on walks all over London, and kind of in our reflection of like, what do you do? Where do you go? What do you engage with as a kid? Like in these spaces is very like, certainly in some parts of London as well. Like me and you are kind of blessed where we grew up in terms of like some of the things that existed nearby. But in certain parts of like London, it's not even close to that. And it's so much like, it's a much shittier area. And to be honest, I'm saying London because that's our experience, but I've also gone to a lot of places all over England where it's a lot worse, to be honest. And I don't just mean cities; I mean like non-cities. I think in terms of, you know, when you like talk to people who are, I don't know so much about you because you live in London, so I don't know how much this occurs with you. But if you ever speak to someone who doesn't come from London about like what their school was like, or what their general community was like, what the crime was like, or what like kids got up to, like when they're adolescent, the shit that I heard, that I hear about from other people is insane. It's mad. Like, it's not like, oh, they had a boring life or whatever out in the middle of nowhere. It's like, no, they got up to wild shit because there was nothing to do. And, you know, like, you know, I found at least amongst our like year that things like drugs wasn't even a question that even came up. There wasn't like, no one was like taking drugs or like anything like that. But you could go to almost any random person and be like, oh, did you have someone in your year that took drugs? Like, clearly. And it's like, oh, yeah, there was this guy and this guy and this guy. And it's like, so this is really odd, I think. I mean, there's this really weird thing where at least while we're not slandering, but while we're like critiquing this whole topic, that there is this odd format where there is a very unholistic sense to which this is being analyzed and looked at. And it's worth recognizing that it's sort of the unfortunate reality that talking about the things that are keeping us quote unquote at home, like what we're enjoying at home, or even what is preventing us from going out when we're talking about like the amount of money that's paid or whatever, has certain effects. And, you know, the fact that me and you can record this right now is an ability of is something that it comes from the technology that allows for a lot of this, right? Since we're obviously nowhere near each other. And, you know, how is this any different to being on a phone? I remember saying that to you like the other day, like, how is this any different to just chatting on the phone with someone? And was this the kind of experience that people had with people talking on the phone to each other far away? Was that considered like a reduction in like kind of physical social norms, especially when we start talking about people who experience the internet and use the internet more than me or you do, you know, for community and so on, in a very like genuinely wholesome way, which I think is and in a way that's fulfilling for them. Shall I start defending this article a little bit, or?
Well, we haven't really attacked it.
No, but I mean, like, kind of going more along with what the article's saying.
Yeah, sure, please.
Yeah. So I do like one of the things that, like, so there's a few hyperlinks in it which you can click on. I forget which one it was, but one of them was talking about the like deliveries, for example. Like going to a restaurant and the place is like empty, but business is booming because you have a bunch of like delivery bags on the table that are being taken away or whatever. And of course, given that my job is literally someone who goes around getting deliveries for people from the shop, I have a very clear like recognition that it's a big industry and it's getting bigger and it's been getting bigger for a long time. We've seen it happen. We've seen the growth of it. And I liked what that was at least saying, which is we have taken something that we know and kind of made a copy that is really like not performing the same experience really. Like the idea that like, okay, so we've got food and we've got eating in like an environment around other people and so on in a nice place. And then it's like, okay, well, you pay for that food the same price, possibly even more because you're paying for delivery, and you're paying it and you're instead having it at home, and you're not even necessarily potentially going to the restaurant to even get it if it's not takeaway. So you have this, so it's like, okay, so these are two examples of like how of like what is essentially the same thing functionally in terms of when we talk about like money being spent and all of that, yet there is this clear separation in terms of how any person is experiencing it and what the kind of atmosphere and so on will be. And I liked that in the sense that we don't want to just create copies, or we don't just want to create like I don't know the right word to use. There's like a brilliant word I could probably come up with, but I don't know. I don't have a good one. Like a simulacrum or something like that. Like a version of what we know to be good social like practices and behaviors that make us feel better, and just making a kind of like version of it which lacks so much of the like the kind of substance that is otherwise what is important, and making it purely functional. And there is a very like purely functional element to a lot of like how we enjoy things, quote unquote, now, to an extent, like whether it be even something like Netflix or whatever. where it's like you're kind of getting what you need, but you're getting it in the most unsatisfying way, and you're getting it in a way that like kind of lacks the potential. I don't know. Here I'm losing a little bit of like the right words to say, because I also think that while I agree with this feeling, I don't have like enough of I don't have something to like use to describe it. But the recognition that like, yeah, okay, we're not going out as much. That's clear. I think there's no argument necessarily about that. I think that is true. The exact reasons why, as you said, is there. Are there cultural reasons that are developing? I think that does exist, merely because not just an economic reason, but like a market reason, which is that, you know, there are we're developing these technologies, we're developing a sort of culture around the technologies that's making us more like that. The fact that you can, you know, even the use of social media works in a very similar way, is developing, you know, we developed a culture around TV, and we developed a culture around radio, and we've developed a culture around social media, right? Like this has happened over time. And I think there was even a thing that wasn't even referring to the internet, but was referring to, in that article, that was referring to like the fact that I think now, like a man this is in America, but like the average man will spend 7 times longer in front of their TV than out with a friend, for example, in the course of a week or something like that. And, you know, when you think about it like that, that's a lot of time you're spending in front of a TV. Now, that's to show, again, that kind of like this isn't necessarily just an internet thing, right? But it's to show that there is like a change occurring, and we have to kind of recognize where that change is leading to, and whether we want it to lead, and how we want it to go. Like it being self-aware of it is great and all, but we need to then decide like how much propaganda are we going to create around this towards saying, okay, this is a lackluster life you're living compared to what you could. I have some other feelings about this, but I want to pass over to you now.
Yeah, no, I was enjoying hearing what you were saying on this. I think that right now we're in a situation with social media, especially, where a lot of the things that we're fed on social media leads into how we are treating each other in real life. So we've gone through the manosphere briefly on this show. We'll probably do a presents on it eventually.
But, hell yeah, we are.
Yeah, like we've discussed that, and I'll be very, very crystal clear when I say this. Anyone who supports anything in that, I'm inclined to want to hurt physically. And that is a problem, because socially, those people are damaged. People who follow the manosphere, they're damaged people. Anyone who's like an incel, they're damaged people. And what's happened is that social media has conditioned them to think that how they feel about, be it women, be it ethnic minorities, be it anyone, is okay. Because, hey, look, other people think like me. When in reality, they don't. It's just you're surrounded by people who are vocal and are loud. And you're in the echo chamber that amplifies their voices. You'll be surprised how many people, who are young people anyway, really believe things such as still to this very day in the year 2025, but girls only like bad boys and things like that. So that mentality is still spoken about, and there's multiple videos on YouTube, and we're going to move on to damaging videos being pushed, actually, which should be our next one. Do you have anything to add on to this, by the way?
I think we'll continue as we go, so I think I'm fine.
Cool. And as we talk about this, I'm going to shift on to our next topic, which is about damaging videos being pushed by TikTok specifically to young people. And the reason why I'm pushing on this is especially this. When it comes to the manosphere, when it comes to people who are preaching quote unquote wisdom to the youth, it is damaging, but also it scares people. It's rage baiting, it's fear. Like I saw a video the other day that came up on a recommended feed, not my own, I saw it on Reddit, and it said 5 ways like women are becoming more uptight. I was like, what the fuck is this shit? And you realize, oh yeah, this is rage bait, like content, I guess, because people who hate it, they're gonna have a look at it and go, what the fuck is this guy talking about? That's one view.
And
People who
comment on it.
go, yeah, people who like really like believe in it, they're gonna watch it and they're gonna send it to their friends. And a lot of the time, it's guys who have never really experienced the opposite gender. And when you don't have that experience and don't have that that conversation, that breaking point, you stay in your lane. And I was lucky, and maybe you were as well, when I was like 13 to 15-ish, 16-ish, when I went through that phase of, girls don't like me. I had a very strong woman in my life that wasn't a member of my family. She was one of my friends, and I very remember her quite vividly pulling me by my afro to the floor and being like, that's just not how it works. That's not how this shit works.
Yeah.
And that changed me. That's like why I'm the prick I am today, because like I understand two things. Either someone finds you attractive or they don't find you attractive. Either way, it doesn't really fucking matter. You know, life is life. There's 7 fucking billion people out there. And if you don't ask somebody, you will never know. Just don't be a fucking cunt and you're fine. These children growing up now, and I'm going to sound like an old man when I say this, they've been told to stay in that lane. They've been told to not explore. They've been told to only view people of the opposite gender as a tool and as a resource. And this is going back. We're taking ourselves backwards, despite technology progressing forward. And Jesus Christ is the most soapboxy I've ever felt on this fucking show.
Really? This is?
yeah, of course. Yeah. It's like, but that's the reality of it, though. I don't want, that's my reality of it anyway. I don't want that to be a thing. I don't want people to be lonely. I don't want people to be pushed videos on social media like what we're discussing now, which I think this might be the longest I've ever spoken on this show. We're gonna keep running with it. Like it's from the I newspaper, and they've done a whole study where they set up a TikTok account and they didn't bother like trying to make an algorithm for it. They just what would be pushed for it. And what was pushed was videos about suicide, videos about depression, to an account of a fictional 13-year-old boy. And the reason why this is, of course, damaging is what we talked about before, of course. Hey, look, what are we going to do here? And you get sent videos saying, nobody loves you, and all that stuff. And to me, a 27-year-old man, well, person, what happens is, I look at that and I start laughing. However, that 13-year-old boy, right now is fictional, but in reality has been pushed to legitimate teenagers. They go, oh, this is actually, relatable to me. I feel this way. And these videos contain imagery and wordings that hurt you intrinsically, and make you feel a certain way that doesn't actually help you at all. I'll pass on to you now.
Boy, I am convinced that if I ever look after, if I'm ever a carer of a child, that I will never give them a phone until a certain point. The thing that bothers me about all of this is we've known for a long time that the access of the internet and social media is like I think you said the night before, it's like a DM, like anyone can sort of DM you essentially on the social media. It's there's a very easy accessibility involved with social media, and there's a part of me that considers like, okay, we've known for a long time that the access of to certain things on the internet. Hey, make sure you're watching your kid and what they're looking at. And I feel like that has kind of been a conversation that we have just had over and over and over again. And I don't know how much has changed, or I don't feel like anything has changed. Now, this is difficult. This is a very difficult thing. Like anything I say, I will automatically put onto it an asterisk of there is probably something I'm not saying that I should technically say with every single statement I make. So cut me a little bit of slack here if I say anything, I don't kind of mention something else to immediately show that this is a very complicated issue. There's a part of me that again sees that and I say again because I bring this up all the time, that kind of relates the experiences of this to any other form of thing that has a big impact on development, that has a big impact on how we grow up and the ways in which we find dependency. The way in which we find dependency as we grow up. When we talk about alcohol, we can talk about it in terms of its neurophysiological effects, but on a developing mind, it's not good for a developed mind, quote unquote, developed in theory. But we can talk about it in terms of that, but we can also talk about it in terms of the behavioral impacts of having something which is that you use as a dependency early on in times of stressful situations, which we know what being a teenager was like. So that's not, we know how bad that time period is. The reason why this demographic, it's not, I think to a certain extent, there's a lot of weird shit that like a kid who's like 7 can find on YouTube or whatever that will get put towards them, and even like say on TikTok or something like that. I'm not saying that there's anything that it's like that there's no effect, but I think that there's a reason why a lot of people's experiences are more around the time when they're an adolescent, and less so when and during like puberty and things like that, and far less to do with when they're like 10 or when they're like 7. This might be completely untrue in a few years because there's just more and more kids like at young ages being on these kind of platforms. So I could be totally wrong, and this is actually like the norm across all age groups, and it's just bad. It's a very sad thing because I don't think ultimately that necessarily any of this is bad intrinsically, but we just know that it's not being done in a way that's ultimately there's just so little oversight, and with so little oversight, there is absolutely nothing to prevent this from occurring. And not just that, but I think these spaces just allow people to, I think it just allows people to kind of create these like these weird outsider spaces that allow for these echo chambers that kind of can create these pipelines towards like dark. Dark is actually a word I don't want to use. A pipeline towards like really like incredible misinformation to ideological thinking that's incredibly destructive for the person themselves and towards society in general. I just think it's bizarre. The only thing that I can say is that this is a representation of humanity as it is, and it is not in and of itself like a weapon of destruction. I know that there are versions of these conversations where there is a actual discussion about how like the internet can be used literally to destabilize like groups of people and so on. Like as in people can make an account pretending there's someone from anywhere and just put out misinformation on the web specifically to get people to do fucked up shit. I mean, the horrible stuff that was happening in the UK, more recently, the kind of right wing in the UK that appeared based on absolute nonsense information was largely spearheaded by obviously like big people who like just took a piece of information they found on social media and then ran with it. But that piece of information, it has been like, I think has been like pulled back to like, basically there's a theory around it basically saying that like it could easily be something from another country attempting to just like cause havoc, like you say, in very much a similar way, like just essentially rage baiting. Like even if it's not like a political or partisan like decision making, it could easily just be a pure like, well, I profit from this because a bunch of people look at it. Yeah, like, and yeah, sorry, it has been. Yeah, I just didn't want to say too much in case like I was like wrong on certain bits of it, but like I think the reality is that we're looking at how destabilized everything is, how unstable it all is, and this is unstable, and we're talking about adults, And I just think that there's probably something that has to be done about the way that we talk about this with children, the way that they are exposed to it. Like I've literally gone through my mind of like, how would I teach my child about the internet? Like, how would I teach them about it? How do I get them to be involved in it yet and not feel like they're excluded from like conversations they can have with their friends, and recognizing that, and also recognizing, as we've just talked about, that less people are out and about. So like when they're bored and they don't know what to do, like what am I going to help them? Like, how do I help them? Like, I can't be there all the time, and I can't like and I've got things I might need to do, or I want to do my own things. Like, it's not just a lot more work. It's also, there's a lot more economic things involved. And also, where are the other kids? Maybe they're not around. A benefit to, like, my niece, for example, happens to live in a place where they have like a courtyard out front, and where loads of kids from other places can get together. So and with, all of these people being able to look over the area, all these families, and basically kind of watch. So there's a reasonable sense of community there. It's a very, I think, at least when I'm there, I think to myself, God, how amazing this is. They do parties here, they do birthday parties here, and everyone can see. And this is very like, there's like I'm not saying that everyone knows each other, but there's definitely a stronger community bond there that just doesn't exist where I grew up, and just doesn't exist in lots of different places, in most places. And that's and that reality means that, okay, well, how do I deal with my kids? How do I raise them, and how do I get them to understand this in the right way? How can I teach like my child, who has no concept of any of this, all of the things I'm aware of? Like, it's not possible. And and I feel there does need to be some cultural recognition of that. There needs to be some way in which we can come together and say, yes, there's lots of shit happening. Lots of people who are on the internet a lot agree with this as well. This isn't like just everyone who uses the internet is like totally fine with it, and then everyone who doesn't use the internet is like, oh, it's causing the world's problems. Like, this is a pretty like well-known issue. And there are going to be, and there has been, studies suggesting all of this. I want there to be like an actual discussion about this. So like I'm not a huge fan of the way that lots of the press or media are talking about it. But then there really does need to be some kind of recognition at some sense. And of course, you can't affect everyone. You can't control everyone. Lots of people are going to do it, and unfortunately, parenting is hard, and life is hard. Is in my opinion harder now in many ways than before. Even if we're earning more or whatever, it's not. And I'm not even saying we are earning more, but like certain families who earn more aren't necessarily in a position where they have more time or have more availability or more energy to give to something like being a parent. So it's the temptation of being able to like put your kid in front of I was put in front of the TV, and it was helpful, right? It helped keep me, doing what I was doing. They didn't have to worry so much, and they got to do their own thing, and they needed that. So I see the temptation, I see it, and I understand exactly why, and I don't want to give any level of judgment towards parents on that scale. Yet I can't help the fact that I can't see a way in which we move on from this without there being some level of kind of responsibility recognized and recognition attached to the fact that these systems that we're using, these very private systems that we're using for especially when we're talking about child development and children, where they have this kind of access that we just are not aware of. And we keep seeing like a random bubble of like some weird shit on the internet that your kid is watching just keeps coming up over and over again. That just leads me to believe that we're honestly fucked if we think that we're going to get away with sort of just that if we don't have like a really serious conversation about what we're actually doing, like what is the point of the internet in the way that we're allowing certain things to exist. And very specifically, I should say, social media being the prime version of this. Though I don't know, is Reddit considered social media? I don't even know.
Yes, yeah, it is.
Okay, so like even like Reddit, for example, Reddit has its issues, but also Reddit doesn't have its issues. Unfortunately, that's the reality. None of these things would exist if they didn't have some positive. But the truth is that like this conversation is going to go back and forth of like, here's the positive of having this, which is why we sort of started talking like that. And then here's the negative of this. And it's just going to be this back and forth, but we need to find a way to like clear out that negative and promote that positive consistently. And I think that there needs to be something. I don't want to keep repeating myself.
Yeah. I think it's a matter of this as well. We are in a state where if we look at the current, we actually discussed it with you yesterday, so I'm going to repeat it again.
That's all right.
When it comes to villains, if you think about like fictional villains like Darth Vader, the Disney witches and all that shit, right? You look at that and you go, that's like, they're awful people, but they're pretty fucking cool, you know? So when they get beaten, you're kind of like, yeah, fucking cool. The villains in real life are fucking losers. Like, Elon Musk is a fucking loser. Mark Zuckerberg is a loser. Jeff Bezos is a loser. And Donald Trump is probably the biggest loser of them all. Like, even Vladimir Putin's a loser, despite, like, he had a weird popularity in the mid-2000s. Because he's a picture of him on a horse and him fighting a bear or some shit. But they're all losers. And everything they do is underhand. And it's like, we're billionaires. We want to keep ourselves rich. And the minute Trump won the election, they went very mask off, of course. So we're now in a stage where social media sites run by Meta, that's Instagram, Facebook, have removed fact-checking. Because they deem it to be, well, they pretty much said it's too woke. And they don't want to fact check anymore. They don't need fact checking. Cool. Twitter, of course, has become a cesspool of just, well, it always was, but it's become an even bigger cesspool of hatred and far-right propaganda. To the point where if you say the word cisgender, it gets removed. If you call somebody a nigger, it's still there. And that speaks volumes. So you have this emboldening of awful viewpoints and things that actually are pretty close to being illegal, like racial abuse online. That's illegal, and it's allowed. Now it's very difficult because these guys are all saying this under the guise of free speech, and it's difficult to engage with people who are followers of the Musks and the Trumps and all that stuff because you say this shouldn't be allowed. And they go, you're trying to impede on my free speech. No, we're not. You're literally being a dickhead. And that's against the law. Harassing somebody relentlessly online is stalking. That's against the law. And these are things that we are struggling to really attune ourselves to because we have this idea that we don't want to impact on freedom of speech. But to be honest, it's not really freedom of speech, it's more freedom of consequence as well here. If you say something bad online, it might not break Twitter's violations, but it's going to break the law, which is why when it comes to footballers being harassed and all that stuff, there's police investigation now. To pretty much immediately. We had Kai Havertz, I'm an Arsenal fan, and his pregnant wife was sent messages wishing that she would have a miscarriage after they lost a game in which he missed a few chances. Awful stuff. Now, that guy typing and sending those messages probably didn't think that there wouldn't be a police investigation into it. That's a freedom of consequence. But social media sites now are no longer willing to cooperate and help in the way that they should because, we're allowed for this to happen. It's fine. So, as a society, we're in a point now where it's close to being unmoderated to allow propaganda to seep through. TikTok being the biggest one. It was banned in America. Today it was banned in America, or yesterday it was banned in America. And the warning message was, the goodbye message was, we've been banned in America. Half an hour later it was updated, we were banned in America, but we hope that President Donald Trump will save us and we'll be able to return to the platform soon. As of an hour and a half ago, I believe it was, a new message has gone up saying, TikTok is back, thanks to the work of President Donald Trump. It was a propaganda message. It's all a propaganda message. So the sites in which that you think, oh yeah, I get all my news from, get all my information from, it's propaganda. You cannot trust social media. like, you can trust the sources that are posted on social media, but you cannot trust the sites themselves. Anyway, anything else, Joe?
I think I'm fine. I actually want to propose something to you.
Yes.
Shall we leave the next topic of this for next week?
Yes, we should.
Cool.
Yes,
Let's
we
do that.
should.
So look forward to that, viewers or listeners. You don't know what
Yeah,
it
I
is.
was saying, I'm not going to edit this bit out, and so I'm going to tell you guys. Yeah, we're going to talk about things with ADHD next week. It'll be fun. We're going to move on. Is there anything else you want to discuss before we move on to the journal bit?
Nah, let's go, brother.
Now it's time for the journal. Yeah, this is the journal. This is old school City Wales. If you've been with us for the very beginning, pretty much. Hi, Ryan. How you doing, man? Hey, look at that, man. This volume 1 because it's fun. Ryan supports Manchester United. They lost 3-1. I'm aging this episode. He has reasons to be upset, but I'm here to tell you right now, if you're also a Manchester United fan, like Ryan, it's okay. You'll be okay. You will be okay. Things will get better. Just not anytime soon.
Wow.
Yeah, we discuss our feelings on the journal. You are on the running orders going first. Do you want to stay going first?
No, I think you should go first.
Okay, cool. My week has been fine. I can't complain. I hate everything, and it's going fine. It's going swimmingly. I just have an issue. Very, 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 very specific issue here. I've seen loads of articles recently, and it says things like, "I'm a vet. Here's what you should feed your dog. Here's 5 things that will cure your dog's depression." And cool, that's all well and good. But then it branched out into other things like, I'm a nutritionist. Here's food that you should eat to get rid of ADHD. To which that triggers me to say this: shut the fuck up, you dopey cunt. Okay, here's the thing. When it comes to any sort of neurodivergent condition, things like that, this idea that foods would eliminate it is, 1, very archaic. It takes us back to the 80s and 70s. 2, that is the shit that you'd hear Jordan Peterson saying. And come on, guys, we're better than this. 3, mainstream newspapers like the Telegraph are publishing this, The Guardian as well. And it's like, what the fuck are you guys doing? Come on, guys. Really? We're in a good place right now. These 5 foods will lower your ADHD. It's not a fucking volume control, mate. like, what are you trying to play out here? Now, if you dig into the article, they kind of skirt around saying the exact thing in the headline. And it's along the lines of, hey, these symptoms will be lowered if you eat these foods. Here's the reality. Not everyone has the same dietary needs and requirements. So it's very difficult to say eating these foods and not eating these foods will save you and do this and do that and do this and that. 9 times out of 10, though, a balanced diet will probably keep you in good stead. So when you say things like, oh, you should have like protein and you should have fish oil to get rid of things like fatigue, because that's what ADHD is. Guess what? Everyone should probably be eating those things too. You're fatigued because you're eating like shit, as well as you have a mental health condition. If you do both, you get both. However, here to tell you right here, right now, you will not get rid of the condition that you have. Okay? If you have something like anxiety and depression and things like that, hey, maybe it will actually help. Eating better, exercise will help. But if you have something that's been diagnosed, like a bipolar disorder, an ADHD, on the autism spectrum disorder, anything along those lines, I'm here to tell you right now that there's no cure for it. Eating better and exercising will help alleviate certain symptoms to do with it, but will not get rid of it. So to anyone who's, I'm an expert, and these are the 5 foods you should eat to cure the fact that you're a fucking dumb bitch, then I'm here to tell you, you're probably still going to be a dumb bitch. And that's okay. That's okay. We love you for it. However, I'm fed up of experts. I'm done. How many of you are there? Okay? Yeah, the fucking football experts who sit and complain and cry about shit. And then you have the nutritionists talking about mental health conditions. What the fuck? Anyway, that's it.
This episode has such good energy.
Okay? Okay, that's it.
Listen,
Viva la
I'm not about to
France
change it. I'm not
and
about to
all
change
that.
the energy, so it's all right. No problem. Actually, to be fair, I will start with this because this will take it out. Maybe I should end with it. I don't know. Should I start high energy and then go into like kind of mellow, or mellow into
Whatever
high?
you feel best. This is your hyper combo.
Hyper combo. No, okay. Let me go high and then to low because that'll lead us to recommendations. Okay. This is a very, very personal thing. Very personal. So I don't expect anyone to understand. I just want to point that out right now. I maybe have mentioned this on the podcast before, that I have a little bit of an issue with like the nature of politeness in social, in the way that we deal with each other socially. I think I even said like a few episodes before, like in sort of support of certain things, like, hey, about like the way that we talk to each other, or how we like engage with each other in small talk and things like that. You know, when I used to not understand small talk at all, now I kind of get it because I've tried so hard to understand it and make use of it properly. That, you know, that they serve certain functions and things like that. There's an element to politeness, though, that I've realized is getting on my nerves a lot, in part because of the work that I do. I work in a shop. You hate like people getting in your way and stuff like that, Alex. Believe me, my whole day is this when I'm working, right? Like it's like 99% of the interactions I have with customers is like us trying to get past each other, and people just sitting having a chat with each other in the middle of an aisle, or like, you know, or people who just have no awareness of anywhere or anyone around them and so on. It's yeah. But the actual like interactions I'm realizing that people have with each other are becoming more and more meaningless, in the sense, like for me personally, this is a personal like expression or a personal interpretation of how I've been paying, of what I've been paying attention to. So, like for example, if you go up to someone and you want to get past someone or something like that, I have not heard a single person, like in the last, like, I don't know how many weeks, say the phrase "excuse me." Like the phrase to mean I need to get past, or I need to get your attention for some reason, that like I need you to do something. And people are like, oh, you know, normally it's like, oh, excuse me, and like, excuse me, and then someone will be like, oh, okay, yeah, you can go past, no problem. A polite thing that you do just to make sure that like it's just basically a way of like getting someone's attention, right? Simple as that. Now all I hear about, and people genuinely at my work like hate this, so this is like not just me, the amount of and I will end up doing this as well now, and I hate when I do it. It's just every single time you interact with someone is you say sorry. It's not even like you explain. It's like sorry, 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 sorry. I don't know how many times I hear the word sorry, or say sorry, or have someone like recoil in reaction to me when I'm like stepping anywhere near them to try and reach for something, because they're like worried that like they're going to invade like a personal space or something like that, even though I've entered into the area. That it's just like it's. And maybe, to be fair, they're getting out of, maybe I'm in their personal space and they don't like it. To be fair, I'm not great with personal space, so that's also one of my problems. But because I just don't have personal space boundaries like that, like a lot of other people do. But the thing is just like sorry, sorry, sorry constantly has actually started to get on my nerves, because it's less it making the word sorry meaningless. Have you ever heard like of someone from like a European country that's not the UK talk about how we say thank you a lot, like way too much? Have you ever heard this before?
Yes, either we say thank you far too much or we say sorry far too much.
Yeah. So the thank you part I don't mind as much, but I do see where they're coming from on occasion. The sorry thing I'm on board with now, because I swear that it's not even like just oh, I'm going to say I'm sorry because like something has happened and we don't know like whose fault it was, or maybe it was my fault, or maybe it was even your fault, but maybe I wasn't paying attention, so who knows? Like, and saying sorry in those moments, I don't mind that as much, because that's a way of going like, hey, let's detach from the situation nicely. But I find now that that the word sorry is being used just for any kind of interaction at all. And it's like we're not even explaining to each other that, like, we're not even like engaging with each other about what the issue is. Like, I'm not even saying, oh, excuse me, and then like moving past you. It's just like the interaction the situation has to be like, I have to immediately apologize, or I have to immediately like do this. And I want to be clear of why, like, this is part of a larger thing. So it's not just simply saying the word sorry. Politeness has a way, and to be honest, politeness, and then like another way of saying this would be like other forms of like shortcutting in language and shortcutting in behaviors because I'm not against politeness in general, like I've hopefully been explaining, is that there's this tendency to boil down like or to kind of water down like terminology and water down like what we mean when we say something. And this is a common thing that language does. So I'm not like pretending otherwise, but we're reaching a point where, from a politeness angle, I feel like people are kind of going out of their way to like say things and act in certain ways and engage with one another. That feels like it, like we were already talking about like, you know, socially interacting with each other and that we're apparently, and without we're doing it less or whatever. What happens when you engage with someone, it feels like it's even less of like a substantial interaction, just because like you're basically not even talking to each other. You're basically just like going through the motions of a robotic response to just kind of get past engaging. Like if someone's wearing headphones or something like that and they don't want to engage with the world, I've got no problem with them. They just want to be on their own. But the amount of times I've interacted with people, because I largely do interact with people, and they can hear me, I can hear them, and our interaction is simply recoiling from each other, like recoiling at the sight of being near one another and trying to deal with just getting past each other. Like I have far too few interactions where I can like smile or laugh with someone and I can actually just say thank you for letting me, you know, for the fact of having an interaction where like one of us has done better for the other, you know, like done a nice thing for the other. The number of times that it's just simply like I'm just going to kind of wash this over with like some level of like some weird like kind of word that means I don't have to make any interaction. Again, it's a very small thing, but I've noticed that a lot of people at work really hate the amount to which that's the interaction they have with customers as well. So hopefully this is just like just because I'm around it so much, that's the only reason that it's bothered, and that it's got nothing, and that it's not necessarily like that everywhere. But anyway, the thing that I want to say that's actually nice is that my ear is like fully healed. I've got no pain in it anymore. I'm keeping on the precautional hat and so on. Like, you know, I'm keeping my ears like warm and safe from any cold weather still. So great. So that I don't end up like having any problems again. But, you know, I was pretty sure that it wasn't anything serious, that it wasn't like a big infection, or it wasn't my eardrum or my inner ear that was affected. And I was right, because I've had so many of these so often, I actually can tell now. Like I'm aware of how painful it is and where it is in my ear that I actually know and understand what it might be. And that has meant that like a lot of the feelings I was expressing before about sad has kind of disappeared a lot. Like the S.A.D. thing has definitely reduced significantly. Alongside that, I realized today, specifically, which is why I'm a little bit high energy as well today, is that I fell back into my old habit with overthinking things, like overthinking social interactions and not just kind of going with the flow, or not even going with the flow. That's the wrong way of saying it. Like not like choosing to kind of switch that off and just allow myself to work to instinctually engage with people. And it's weird because it's one of those things I literally didn't notice until today, but I realized that I've been thinking like this for the last like week and maybe a little bit more. I lost a lot of confidence when I had my ear pain and everything. Like it really did kind of affect me, and it really did bring my mood down. And I think at that point that it started creeping back. To be fair, I was also ill during Christmas time, so there may have even been a bit happening there. But I do remember being still a little bit more like kind of off the cuff, so to speak, off my leash. And it really shows now that I think about it, about like how I kind of like why I've been like finding it a bit difficult recently to feel kind of like socially connected a little bit, like at work. And literally, like when I noticed it, I started talking. I started talking as normal, and then ended up complimenting a girl that I think is really attractive, and it just happened. And thinking to myself, hey, I wouldn't have done that if I was like worrying myself about how I should speak to this person, and so on. And it would have really, and I mean, beyond anything, it like thinking that much ends up, and I'll end up talking about this one day when I talk about my autism, like on its own. I know actually I'll talk to you about that later. But the like, if nothing else, you spend so much time in your head that literally in real life, it's like it takes you seconds to to answer anyone, because you like something will come up and then you'll be like stuck in a like like thinking about like so many different things about how you're meant to engage, that you end up like missing opportunities to actually talk to people properly. Or you like try to say something half-heartedly when they're like 20 meters away from you, and you're like, oh shit, that was really awkward in theory. So it's like, and it was really nice to like feel that shut off, you know. And then someone in my house, I asked them for a hug because I felt like I wanted a hug because I've been a bit touch starved lately, and I knew that, and this was a person who I knew liked hugs and things like that. It's just I hadn't been like thinking about it recently, and it's like, oh, I feel this way, let me ask them. I didn't even like, I didn't like overthink about it. And I'm just saying all of this because like now I'm back on it, so maybe I'll I'll have a lot more to say about it the second time round, I suppose, about like the difference between the two. But also I think it's useful to mention that like, hey, things can take you out of your good zone, if you know what I mean. And if you know what your good zone is, or you know the kinds of things that make you feel good, then when those events happen, being able to go, hey, I'm, I can come back round to it by just like going over this checklist of thinking like, hey, what are the kinds of things that I want to get back into? If that's like hobbies and things like that, I think then obviously there's probably something that you have a lot of kind of habitual experience with. In my case, for example, this is like something I kind of have to slightly actively, slightly passively do in my brain, and I have to think about. So, it's a little bit more, it takes a little bit more like kind of recognition. But I think that just remembering that, like, oh yeah, you remember that you can call someone and you will feel better if you do, or, remember that you can read that book, or you can remember that you can play that game, or you can remember that you can go for a walk, and remembering what makes you feel happy is important. And it's easy, like when you get ill or when something happens in your life, of these things to kind of forget what makes you feel happy. So maybe make a checklist. Maybe I should make a checklist of like everything to a certain extent, just to kind of remind myself on occasion. But just I think it's nice that maybe we get in the habit of like thinking that way, so that we remind ourselves of what makes us feel good, what makes us feel like ourselves, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I like hearing you talk, Joe. It's always fun.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't leave you any like openness for that. I didn't want to. I felt like I needed to get through a lot of stuff,
But I also don't want
any,
any, because I feel like it's a good time to end here.
Cool.
And I don't need it. I don't need it. So we forgot to do recommendation station. So we're recording this again. So yeah, choo choo. It's time for recommendation station. Joe, tell me what you're recommending.
The Sajam Slam. That's not a glitch saying that name. So the Sajam Slam, can you hear me all right? It's all good?
Yes, I can.
Brilliant. So the Sajam Slam is like an event. It's really cool. Sajam is a huge guy in the fighting game community. I've seen his content for quite a long time. He's now become, I think, one of the big pillars, I suppose, of the FGC. And got a shout out this just cool event. It basically just gets a bunch of streamers who, largely speaking, don't have like a ton of experience with fighting games, and then have like a tournament where you have a particular fighting game. In this case, it's Street Fighter 6. I think this is the second time they're doing Street Fighter 6. They've done Tekken is the other game they've done. And they have like an expert. So Brian F is my guy that I'm sort of looking at for this particular event. And they have four streamers / content creators who, for example, FD Signify was on the Tekken version of this, like in the last Tekken one, I think had FD Signify on it. And basically, these four content creators are then going to be just taught to play Street Fighter, and then there's just going to be like a round robin, and there's going to be like a little tournament, and then I think there's other things that there's like kind of a big event, and it's just fun. At the very least, it's like really good. It's nice to have like Sajam is doing a really good job of like kind of expanding the FGC, the fighting game community's like kind of influence into other realms, because I think even fighting games tend to be a particular niche of games that doesn't tend to penetrate into other areas of gaming. So it's kind of fun to see people experience it and appreciate it. We have some people that come back to it, some people who get really good. SK, like really like SK, they ended up being like the second best of the four from like a skill level, because they're all put into like skill brackets so that there's like equal competition. And they went from that to literally the top of the streamers. So then, they've really improved, and it's really been cool to watch. So yeah, it's just a really fun time. It's a very good experience. There's loads of content from, if any of the streamers or content creators that you're interested in are playing, then they'll post video content about it and so on. And then on top of that, it's just fun to watch the actual event. I think the round robin occurs on January 22nd and 23rd. So I'm not sure what day that is. Wednesday and Thursday. And then their like finals is on the 26th. So that's on the Sunday. So catch it. It might already be happening right now. They'll be doing training up to the point that this podcast comes out. So yeah, good times.
Cool. Look at that. So I recommend O.C.D, which is a short film by Luca Pizzoleo. Please tell me I pronounced that correctly. Pizzoleo. It's on YouTube. I'm going to link it in the description. It is a short film about, you've guessed it, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and it stars Stephen Ogg, who you might remember from GTA 5 as Trevor Phillips. He absolutely hates being referred to as Trevor from GTA. He values his acting career as a lot higher than that. He has posted multiple videos of him doing cameos of him going, I'm not Trevor from GTA, that's a fictional character, but I am Steven. And it's quite funny because I quite like the energy, And I'm also going to recommend to you guys, if you are into gaming and football, SP Football Life 25. SP stands for Smoke Patch. Pretty much Pro Evolution Soccer 21. That base game is one of the best football games made ever. However, it's outdated to a fuck. So, a bunch of independent guys were like, hey, we like this game. The new EA games are really bad. Pro Evolution Soccer has gone a different direction. It's become eFootball. So we're going to update this game and mod it and just keep modding it and give it new teams, update the transfers, make it really good. And they did that. They've done it for 4 years now. And then another guy came in and said, hey, I love this game too. I'm going to update this and make this really modern. I'm going to get everything up to date. But I'm also going to add different quality of life changes to the game and remove glitches and add things that make the game ridiculously good. It's to the point now where if you have a powerful enough PC, the graphics can look so good that what people do is they play the game, record the game, post it on YouTube, and they post it the same day as an actual game of football is being played. So that way, people are tricked into clicking on the video to watch football highlights illegally. It's superb. It is superb. The game is it's nowhere near flawless, but it is for me the best football game that has been made in the last 10, 15 years. If you're into football, get the Mega Patch 3. One guy by himself has been making it. It is just fun. I'm doing an Arsenal Master League save, and it feels realistic when I concede the goals because I'm a fucking doofus. When I score goals because I'm a fucking genius, you know? And it feels good. I'm having fun. And it's a lot better than what eFootball is, and a lot better than EA Sports FC 24, 25, 20, whatever the fuck it is now. I haven't played the new EA Sports football games this season, bar the demos, and I wasn't really impressed. UFL, I'm enjoying a little bit of, but I haven't played it in about 2 weeks, because again, it's the same thing, like, oh, it's laggy, this and that. But Mega Patch 3, which is now in the SP Football Life, oh, it's great. And also, he's put a whole new soundtrack in of songs released in 2024 and 2025, and oh my goodness, there's something crazy about playing a football game and then hearing all I ever wanted was a black Grand National. Fuck being rational, because he's put Kendrick Lamar in there. So I'm happy. You can tell by how I'm expressing this. I'm happy with it all, and that's that.
What a positive note for both of us.
Yeah. So now I have to cut that, put that in, and then play from. You know, you're gonna hear me say, probably in a completely different tone, we're gonna take 2 steps to the ring, get out of it. So here, enjoy that. Anyway, bye.
Love.
I have enjoyed this episode thoroughly, and I hope you listening have enjoyed it too. As we take 2 steps to the rear and get out of here. We're in the wind. See ya.
I was about to say something really awful. I'm not going to say that.
And this is why you have to vote for the